Welcome everyone. We'll just give it another few seconds to let people join and then we'll kick off. Okay, let's get started. So a very warm welcome to this information session about IS Essentials. It's great to have you here. We will kick off in a minute, but before we do that, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. And we acknowledge their deep connection to land, water, and culture, and pay our respects to the elders past and present. And tēnā koutou katoa to our attendees in New Zealand as well. So, my name is Monique Isenheim. I'm head of market development at the ISC. And in this session today, we've got a very diverse audience of some people who know the ISC and the rating system really well. And we've got some people who are fairly new to this. So we're sort of striking a balance and starting with a general overview about what the ISC is, what we do and how our ratings work. So if you're really familiar with that, feel free to make a tea maybe and just listen with one ear. We'll then talk about IS Essentials, our ratings tool for smaller projects under $100 million CapEx, and about the pilot phase that we're currently in and how projects can join. We also have a case study. And then we'll get into a more technical review of the differences between IS Essentials and the existing tools. This is probably most relevant for those of you who are more familiar with the IS rating system. If you're not as familiar, again, this is maybe a chance to get a tea and just listen with one ear and then come back for the Q&As. We do have the Q&A at the end, but feel free throughout the session to pop them in the Q&A chat and we will either answer them in writing or at the end of the session. Okay. Okay, so just starting with a quick intro to the ISC, the Infrastructure Sustainability Council is a membership, not-for-profit and purpose-based organization. Really, it's the peak body for infrastructure sustainability in Australia, New Zealand and beyond. And our purpose is enabling sustainability outcomes in infrastructure. And we do that by inspiring leadership and collaboration and really helping to move the market and setting new goalposts for what sustainability means and supporting the transition of the industry. We've got about 200 or a little bit more than 200 organizations across the whole infrastructure ecosystem. So from contractors and governments to delivery agencies, consultants, and then going on to suppliers, which includes financiers, that's on the next slide, operators, and then a whole bunch of industry associations as well. So really covering the whole spectrum of players in the ecosystem. Now, the focus of our work is all around the IS rating scheme, and we'll talk about what that looks like in a little bit. But we're supporting that through community building that includes events and conferences and our award ceremonies, through knowledge building, through thought leadership. We regularly publish case studies and other publications. We do a fair bit in advocacy space through leveraging our influence and partnerships to really drive the goalposts for sustainability, and then enabling the growth in the industry and the capacity building through training, products, and accreditation. Now, why should we worry about IS ratings? What are the benefits of doing them? So, oh, sorry. What are IS ratings? Sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. So IS ratings are deployed across Australia and New Zealand. And we currently have about 200 projects either in certification or that have been certified, and that accumulates to over $200 billion in total capital expenditure. The IS rating system is applicable for all asset types. Traditionally, we had a lot of focus on road and rail, but it's really great to see that we increasingly get projects in the energy and water sector, and really expanding the impact across the whole infrastructure sector there. Also worth noting that a lot of governments and agencies are mandating the infrastructure rating tools. Usually that depends on the capex of the projects, but that's one of the ways on how they drive sustainability across their projects. So in terms of how the IS ratings work, so there is a ratings tool for the whole life cycle of the infrastructure asset, starting from the planning stage to design, as-built, and then operations. IS Essentials, which we're focusing on today, is a design and as-built ratings tool for projects under $100 million capex. And the way the ratings work, really high level, is the project gets registered, then it is assessed against the credits in the technical manual by the project, and then it is certified by an independent third party. And then based on the overall number of points achieved, you get the certification and a certain award level. And the higher the points, the higher the award level. So now we're coming to why do IS ratings. So when we focus on climate, which is where a lot of the energy is at the moment, no pun intended, but infrastructure enables up to 70% of all greenhouse gases in Australia. And it's probably a similar number in New Zealand, albeit probably a bit smaller. And we also know that the earlier in the life cycle of an infrastructure asset climate is considered, the more impact can be had and the more the carbon impact can be reduced. And we can probably say the same about infrastructure sustainability in general. So going at the next slide, the ratings tool is really aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's looking at different credits across 4 categories: governance, environment, social, and economic. And then below those headlines, we've got individual credits that are looking at different impacts and how they can be reduced. So what does that look like in practice? So all of the credits are outlined in the technical manual together with a lot of guidance to help you through. Here you can see one example of a credit. It usually states the intent. So what is the credit trying to achieve? And then there are usually 3 levels. And the higher you get, the more points you get in your final rating. We don't reward compliance with legal requirements or business as usual. But as soon as you get into measuring and improving your impact to improving that impact or getting to net zero impact, or even enhancing and restoring, the higher your score gets. We have also undertaken a return on investment study in 2020. And just to note that this is forward-looking. So if the majority of capital works would undertake an IS rating in the future, the expected return on investment would be at least $1.6 for each dollar spent, but probably more in the $2.40 range. And as you can see on the top right, a lot of that is CO2 avoidance, but also some other benefits. So for example, around waste and water. And those are just the easily quantifiable benefits from the IS ratings. What this number does not yet take into account are benefits like open space and health outcomes and human capital building, which are a bit harder to quantify. So in reality, the return on investment on a society level is probably higher than that. If you are working in the local government space, IS ratings can really help you achieve your local net zero or sustainability targets as well. As I said, climate is a big topic, but really the IS ratings go beyond that and can really help you achieve on a local level to contribute to net zero targets, but also to broader sustainability outcomes. We've got those two reports online, and please feel free to reach out if you would like to access them to find out more about them. Okay, I'm handing over to Tom now, who will talk about the IS Essentials product and the pilot phase.
Thanks, Monique, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Young, the New Zealand regional lead, New Zealand lead for the IS Council. I typically deal with all the projects based over here in New Zealand, but I'm also acutely involved in the IS Essentials pilot. So just briefly, I'm going to talk you through the IS Essentials pilot. For those of you who've been to one of these sessions before, there's probably a couple of little tweaks from what you've maybe heard previously, but we'll just run through the overarching information to start with. So IS Essentials is our tool that we're developing for projects underneath or under 100 million capex. And it really came out of a call from market to try and pull together something which is a little bit nimbler and maybe a little bit more proportionate to the resources and the effort available to those smaller scale, if you like. Appreciating there's still complex projects under that 100 million bracket. The focus as a result of that is very much on local government projects, and that's to reflect the fact that local governments do typically tend to have these under 100 million worth of assets which they're designing and constructing. And just on that, as Monique pointed out, Essentials at the moment is purely on the design and construction, so parallel to the design and as-built ratings that we have in the full tool. We've built it off version 2.1 of the technical manual. So we took version 2.1 and we sort of stripped it back, pared it back to try and reduce the complexity and the scale of what will be in the pilot. And worth pointing out that it's going to be our first digital rating, so quite a landmark move for the ISC. And when the full version of the Essentials will come out, it will be our first digital rating. So that obviously offers us lots of opportunities to, again, be more efficient and to provide collateral, which through a digital platform is useful to projects. Just to call out the support that we've received from Westpac, the New Zealand Government Innovation Fund, and that's obviously supporting us along with the pilot projects in trying to drive forward this pilot to try and deliver a tool which reflects and is molded by those pilot projects to deliver what's needed for these under 100 million projects. We're currently still accepting pilot projects, and we'll do so probably through to around about the end of Q2, Q3. It may extend beyond that, 23, with the full launch expected towards the end of this year. So we're gearing up and we're cracking on with it. Slide, please, Daniel. Thank you. So just briefly on the pilots which we've got confirmed so far, we've got 20 pilots underway. And the interesting thing from our point of view is that the range of pilots projects that we've got on board. So this started around about towards the end of 2021, and we've had 20 pilots running through in various stages. Tracking range of projects across various asset types. As Monique spoke about earlier, traditionally our asset types was probably around road and rail, but because we're moving into that slightly smaller bracket of under 100 million, we're getting some really interesting different asset types. And you can see on there, just to call out a couple of them, the Channel Beacons replacement project up in Queensland is one of our first projects, and we'll come on to talk a little bit about the case study from them shortly. That and we've got a boardwalk over in Auckland in New Zealand as well. So some really different types of assets, which is really useful in the pilot because it allows us to try and mold and sculpt the tool to reflect these different challenges and opportunities which come with these very different asset types. The range of both geographical distribution and the asset types and the capital range has been really, really valuable to us. So the smallest scale project we've got at the moment is around 8 million, and we've got them, the pilots up to 95 or 96 million, I think is the highest capital value at the moment, and across New Zealand and Australia and across various territories and states within Australia. But just to call out, we are still onboarding. If anyone has any pilot projects they'd like to speak to us about, please do get in touch, because the more we speak to and the more feedback we get on them, the more valuable it is obviously for the industry as a result of the opportunity to mold the tool and obviously for ourselves to get those projects on board. Slide, please. Thank you. The process is very similar to the slide Monique spoke about earlier on in the IS rating process. It follows a very similar approach with a couple of little tweaks. Firstly, that initial project assessment. So again, any pilot projects or anyone interested in pilot projects, please reach out. We can have an informal chat through to find out whether the project would be suitable and the timing would work. We'll then hopefully sign you up, get you on board, run through the rating agreement, materiality assessment, etc. A couple of key points: you do still need an ISAP to deliver this. So the essentials rating does still require that self-assessment approach. We do then run through a verification and certification. The certification model, the certification levels follow very similar to the version 2.1, although with recognition that this is a pilot in there. And the key point, as we say time and time again, and a lot of pilots will be fed up with me saying this to them, the feedback is really what the value is here. The pilots will drive sustainability outcomes, and we'll come on to that in a moment, but the feedback and the opportunity to mold the tool is really the point of this pilot. This is just a quick slide for those of you who've maybe never engaged with an IS rating before. This is sort of what the technical manual looks like. So this is what projects will work to. So Monique showed earlier on a slide which demonstrated how, as you move up the levels, you're rewarded with more points, if you like. This is just an example of what those levels may look like. So we pulled out here one of the leadership credits. You can see there's different criteria for the design phase of the project and the construction phase of the project. Now those talk to each other. So as you complete your design phase, the commitments and what you've done in that design phase will typically feed through into that construction and as-built phase. And just to call out here, this is the very high level credit criterion. Within the technical manual, there's additional guidance which drills down and gives you more bespoke instruction and detail on what those criteria require in order to demonstrate how the project is working. So why join the Essentials pilot? Well, I suppose, like, why do an IS rating? We've probably spoken about that a touch before. I think the pilot probably does the same. It's still driving quadruple bottom line outcomes. And I won't read through all the bullet points there, but the pilot still does drive that. In addition to that, it obviously upskills the team and the project in delivering an IS rating. I think Essentials is actually a really good opener for a lot of projects and these smaller scale organisations that have maybe not taken on an IS project before. Essentials gives you a good opportunity to get into that. And critically, as I labour the point, it's about feedback. It gives you the opportunity and projects the opportunity to try and mould the tool or to help influence the tool and to provide us with the support. And that's recognised through the joint communication we'll make. We want to make a big story about this. It's critically important that projects are on board with that. And the ISC is here to promote the benefits that the pilot has delivered, both in the sustainability benefits and in the benefits they've given us in delivering a tool which is fit for purpose. So to participate, it's pretty easy. Just get in touch with us. Our details, I'm sure, will be attached to the end of the slide. If not, just get in touch with anyone at the ISC and let us know that you're interested. Even if it's just an informal chat to find out a little bit more, please do. The participation will include certification, as I spoke about before. You can see on the top right there, it's a pilot certification, very much aligned to the levels from 2.1. We also offer some pilot training to take you through that Essentials. And we recognise that Essentials is going to be nimble. or the pilot in particular is going to be nimble as we go through things. So we are offering a lot of this dedicated project management support and ISC support as you go through those stages, because we recognize that a lot of projects coming on board have maybe never undertaken an IS rating before. And we've spoken about the communication and the opportunities which come as a result of that. It's a $30,000 lump sum fee for both the design and as-built. So that's all the IS support. And that takes you through the verification and certification. But there will be obviously internal resources that you'll require in order to carry out the assessment and pull together that submission. One of the things that's come out of this pilot is, through the feedback that we received from a number of projects, is this requirement or the help that can be offered through the ISC, through our training portal and the resources that we can deliver. And so just to quickly share some of those resources, we're pulling together a free course at the moment, and that free course will be a sort of an introduction to the Infrastructure Sustainability Council. That foundations course will give you a good foundation, I suppose, a good footing to take forward an IS rating. We then will also have IS Essentials ISAP training. A couple of the other things which we're pulling together at the same time, you can see in the bottom right there is an IS Essentials typical roadmap. It's purposefully small because the intention here isn't for you to drive in and read that. I'm happy to share that. If projects are interested in getting hold of that, please let us know. But that's a resource that's been requested through feedback from projects looking for a typical roadmap. So we pulled that together, and we'll continue to pull together collateral as we run through this process. So we recognize that Essentials Pilot has now been running for over a year, and we're continuing to tweak things, and we're continuing to provide collateral as we run through this process. Part of the other feedback that we've had is around putting together webinars and tutorials, and obviously on the ISAP resources. For those of you who are ISAPs, there's already ISAP resources available there. There's some webinars up on there, and a lot of the webinars there will be pertinent to IS Essentials as well as the full rating scheme. And we'll be pulling together case studies. And I think the next slide may in fact be on one of the Essentials case studies. Indeed it is, look at that. It's almost as if I looked at the slides beforehand. So the case study which we've got here is from the Beacons project, which I spoke about earlier on, one of the very early pioneers in the pilot project. And they've been fantastic in providing us feedback and helping us to try and sculpt the tool. I won't read through all the details here. I'm happy to share this case study in a more detailed case study on the back of this presentation, but they've been really open with us about what's been delivered, the challenges and the opportunities, and what's been realized, and the sustainability benefit that's been realized going through this IS Essentials pilot. Recognizing the fact that they haven't been verified or certified yet, but it's still driving outcomes. And I think that's a key part of what we're trying to drive here. Focusing on the outcomes, yes, points will come out of it, and yes, there'll be a certification coming out of it. But if we can focus on the outcomes, hopefully everything else should fall into place. And that is me. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass now over to Ty Momberg, our technical manager, who's going to talk to you in a bit more detail, I think, on some of the technicalities of the tool.
Thanks very much, Tom. Welcome, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ty Momberg, and I'm the technical manager with ISC. This part of the presentation is an overview of the major developments associated with the Essentials tool development. It may be a repeat for any of you that attended the previous Essentials webinar, but please bear with me as I go through these. And then we will have a Q&A session afterwards where we can deal with any kind of updates and questions from yourselves. So as you can see from this slide, there are about 10 developments or approaches that we are working on to reduce the scale and complexity of the Essentials rating tool. We have already done a lot of work and thinking on some of these, and others are still being developed. So for example, we have clear pathways on initiatives like reductions in credits and criteria, the updated materiality assessment, and the new approach to base case, while others still require further development and thinking, including things like the organizational program approach, templates, and examples, i.e. which credits need these the most and what format is best suited, and also the digitalization of the tool. The idea for today's session is not to go through every single one of these, but rather just to talk broadly to 4 of these developments to provide you a sense of what the tool entails. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the first development that I'm going to be talking through and providing an overview of is the credit criteria deletions and modifications. The items red boxed in the above slide clearly communicate what this development item is all about, i.e. it is the review of every single credit criteria, and then the deletion or modification of specific criteria or parts of criteria to make them more relevant and applicable to smaller projects in terms of scale and complexity. And in this particular example, so this is not by chance, but this is the same credit that Tom was showing us earlier, the LEA1 credit. Tom was showing us the finished updated version. This is the 2.1 version with where you can see the modifications and deletions. So for example, if you look at that first red box under level 2, the requirement for public reporting has been deleted from level 2, and it has actually been moved across to level 3, and the previous 2 level 3 requirements have themselves been deleted entirely. We believe this is more appropriate for smaller projects, and we have made well over 100 of these changes. Next slide, please. Thank you. This item, or the next item, is materiality assessment. So again, just for those of you who might not know how it works, we have a materiality assessment process across all our tools, and it works. So what it is to achieve a rating and to measure performance. IS rating scheme has a point scoring system which is adjusted and tailored to fit the profile of each specific asset through this materiality assessment process. Each project goes through the materiality assessment where the project team answers specific questions about their project, which identifies its risks and opportunity, reflects the stakeholders' priority topics, and then it gives more weights and points to these areas, and the points are adjusted automatically. Next slide, please. So that was, I guess, the general context. We have made a significant change to this within the Essentials tool, and this is really one of the bigger or meatier developments to help reduce scale and complexity. So as you can see from this slide, the materiality assessment for Essentials is linked to the project's capital value. Projects under 20 million will have only 20 credits screened in. And please notice my use of the word screened in, and what that really means is available to them. Projects from 20 to 50 million will have 25 credits screened in, and projects between 50 to 100 will have 30 credits screened in. Again, the points are redistributed once the screening process has been undertaken. And as you can see, the intent is very obviously that smaller projects do less. It is important to note that there are no compulsory or mandatory credits. So this is all about the screening process and then which credits are available to projects. There are absolutely no compulsory or mandatory credits. It is also important to note that for smaller projects, for example, in the under 20 million band, pursuing level 3 of just 3 of your highest value credits may be enough to achieve a bronze rating, which is really illustrating, again, the reduction in scale of this tool. This development and all the others are being tested by pilot projects to see if they work in the real world, as detailed by Tom. Next slide, please. Excellent, thanks. So this next development is an update to the base case approach. And this update has 2 main benefits. So firstly, it reduces the amount of modeling required by projects, as it's really more based on actual data rather than modeling. And secondly, it increases the accuracy of the base case as a result of using more actual data rather than, again, models. How does the new approach work? Firstly, for those who are not familiar with this, I was going to take a step back and explain how the previous process worked. I am simplifying it a bit, but basically the previous approach required projects to model a base case or business as usual construction footprint plus operations footprint at the very earliest stages of the project. And that was then compared against your actual footprints from later on in the project. As I'm sure most of you have experienced, the assumptions or modeling undertaken at the very earliest stages of designs very rarely match the final product or development in all aspects. So therefore, the new methodology uses a reverse calculation from the actual back to a more aligned and relevant base case business as usual. And this happens in both the design and as-built stages. Basically, you start with the actual and work backwards towards a BAU base case. It's quite tricky to explain, but hopefully the next slide should clarify what I mean. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here you can see it really clearly. The starting point is the actual. And then what you do, you then reverse calculate. The reverse calculation occurs, which includes adding all the project initiatives and savings back onto the actual to calculate a more accurate and relevant base case. So just to be super clear, the actual is now the starting point and not that modeling undertaken at the very earliest stages of the project. Obviously, all the initiatives and savings that are added back needs to be justified and evidence, but we believe this is a more accurate method of calculation and also an easier process to follow. Next slide, please. Thank you. Development item 6 on the list is the organizational program approach. So this item, again, similar to the materiality assessment, we believe will be a very large part of the essentials tool methodology. And at this point, we're still looking at a number of different options and ideas, which will then be tested with the industry. This development is to recognize and enable that work undertaken as part of a program of works, or at the organizational level, may be used to meet credit criteria or parts of credit criteria within an IS submission, and therefore recognize the efficiency of these scenarios. As I was saying, this development is still in the early stages and requires some further work and thinking. We are working with pilot projects and also with the Essentials Technical Working Group to develop a solution that can maximize efficiencies in the real world. Great. The previous slides provided an overview of some of the specific tool developments that we are undertaking to create the Essentials tool. And now the next slide details the development process that we have used. The slide is quite busy, but basically it's mapping the technical tool development process and shows how the technical manuals and final tool are being iteratively updated on the back of stakeholder feedback. And the top half of the slide shows the transition of the technical manual from draft version 1 in that really faded out color all the way through to final. You might not be able to see all the details in the lower half of the slide, but it really demonstrates again that there are 4 iterative steps to the tool development. Step 1 is stakeholder feedback inputs. So this is input from pilot projects as well as other groups like the Essentials Technical Working Group. Step 2 is where the IC then collates and undertakes an initial analysis of that feedback. Step 3 is the detailed technical review and includes the ISC's ITP, or internal technical panel, as well as any subject matter experts. We've been kind of liaising and working with a number of subject matter experts in terms of ecology and waste, and as well as some other fields. And then finally, step 4 is incorporating the relevant technical details into the rating tool updates. As I've said a number of times, this process is iterative, and we are currently seeking feedback on Rev 2 and Rev 3 of the technical manual to determine what the final TM and tool will look like. It's really important for us to recognize that LOC Consulting was the technical consultant working on the Essentials tool development, and we would really like to thank them for all their hard work and efforts in shaping the tool. So thank you very much. That wraps up my overview session, and we will now have some time for Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, so if you've got any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box. And we've got a question from Claudia, probably for you, Tom. How is the selection of the credits undertaken?
Thanks, Monique. Yeah, so it's through our materiality assessment. So if you're familiar with our weighting assessment process or our materiality assessment process, it's the mechanics of it are very similar in ICE Essentials. We run at the kickoff phase of the project. We'd run through that materiality process. And how that works is a series of questions associated with each credit to try and get the tool, as it works with the full tool, to try and mold the tool to make sure the most material issues associated with that project have the greatest weighting. And so what we do is we do that for Essentials, and then there's some back-end calculations which effectively screen in the most important or the most material credits based on the answers provided in that materiality assessment.
I was just going to add, this might not be, I think Tom did answer the question, but it just made me think of one of the first tool developments, which was having a holistic look at the version 2.1 tool, which has 38 credits, and we reduced the total number down to 34 credits, effectively taking 4 out. And that was done through, again, some initial analysis with stakeholders, as well as with LOCI Consulting. We took out the 4 credits that we thought were least relevant and applicable to smaller projects. Thanks.
Yeah, and maybe just to add to that, so this is sort of the process of how we determine what to measure, because we measure what matters, but then there's also a step where the project goes and looks at the credits that we've scoped in and then decides which ones to address. So maybe worth talking to that as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Monique, because I think as Ty pointed out in his slide, let's say you're in that smallest bracket and you have 20 credits screened in. That doesn't mean that you need to do 20 credits. And it's, as with the full rating, you can pick and choose which of those credits that you have screened in you can go for. And what we see a lot of projects, and I suppose the most successful projects, probably just focusing in on a few of those credits, which are of the most material importance to them. And we recognize, and I think part of the ICE Essentials pilot has been about recognizing, look, the resources available to some of these smaller projects, I say smaller, sorry, inverted commas, but these slightly smaller capital value projects, the resources available to them aren't as significant as for these over $100 million projects. And so it makes sense to proportionally put your effort into those credits, which are of the greatest or potentially the most material to you.
Thank you. There is a question about when the Free IS Foundations training is available. That's currently in development, should be available hopefully in the next couple of months. So watch out for that. A question from Hope. Who were the consultants that assisted in the technical tool development process? That's one for you, Ty.
Yeah, so that was LOCI Consulting. And they were really good. I think I haven't shown it today, but somewhere else, I think we had over 38 meetings going through all their analysis, and they literally went through every single word in the 2.1 technical manual, every single credit criteria, trying to think about how it might be adapted or if it was still applicable for smaller projects, and provided literally hundreds of recommendations and suggestions, which we then discussed internally and with them over at least 38 meetings, and those are continuing as we keep going and getting more feedback from pilot projects. Thanks.
Yeah, so sort of the principal consultants, but then all the contributions from the pilot projects and the technical working groups that span the whole ecosystem as well, I would say. So just going through. A question about the base case. Maybe let's pick that one from Sam. Does the IS Essentials to automate the back calculation of the base case? Are these backcast calculations conducted by the assessor or SQP, and the results entered to IS Essentials?
Yeah, and yes, it's the SQP or the assessor who'd undertake that, and then they'd utilize the results of that in their evidence for the IS Essentials. Now, you do, if you know the tool, you still need to undertake a base case proposal form where you lay out some of your assumptions. But the idea, I think, as Ty laid out, is just trying to reduce some of the effort involved in putting together that base case, which typically those resource credits, we've probably typically seen those as being the most time consuming, if you like, or the most effort required in them. So the aim of the backcasting approach is to just try and reduce some of that effort, but still deliver the outcomes that we want to achieve in them.
One question, I guess, for clarification, is there a separate technical menu for the projects less than 100 million, and how can it be accessed? So yes, there's a technical menu specifically for IS Essentials, which targets projects under $100 million. And at the moment, it's accessible for the pilot projects because it's a draft version and we're making changes as we go through the pilot process. That's the purpose of it. But once we launch, and that's forecasted for the end of the year, then that will, of course, be made available, and probably before that, even for public review.
Yeah, it's currently draft Rev 3. There was a question from Herman, which I don't know if I understood correctly, talking about testing it within an environment of a portfolio of projects. But probably my slide, the organizational / program approach slide, spoke to that best. So yes, we are very aware of that as an item to continue investigating. What I was saying with regards to that is that that's probably going to be a really big part of the essentials to how we answer and how we develop the methodology for that. We haven't quite nailed it yet, so we're still working on ideas and options, and we definitely will be testing it with it. I guess in terms of key lessons learned, the lesson we're very aware of is that it will be a big part of the tool, and we need to get it right and get it right. Yeah. Thanks.
And just to call out from that, Ty, if anyone is aware of any portfolio projects that they'd like to come and talk to us about, please do. We see it as a real opportunity with Essentials, but we recognise that there's hopefully some efficiencies that can be gained in those portfolio projects. So yeah, please reach out to us, even if you're not sure as to whether it would work or not, or you've just got a little bit of inkling of idea. It'd be great to chat to you about it.
Yeah, so the 2 reports, including the place-based approaches to net zero documents, are available on our website. I see if I can find the link and pop it in here, but they're on our website. They're definitely publicly available. There is a question from Peter about the fees. 30K fee from IC seems high if you've got a $5 million project targeting bronze level by achieving level 3 on 3 credits. May there be a way of scaling? So in the pilot phase, the fee is fixed. We do have an option to reduce the fee for very small council projects, but the fee is the same across the different, it doesn't depend on what kind of level you're trying to achieve. And really, the one thing that we want to say as well, especially for organizations who haven't done ratings, really the purpose of the pilot goes way beyond achieving a certain ratings outcome. It's really the purpose is for us to make sure that we create a ratings tool that works for the market, that is accessible and scalable, and that we can build in all the feedback. On the project side, especially where this is the first time that an organization is doing it, it's really a great outcome to go through the whole process in the first place, regardless of how many credits you are addressing and what the final outcome is, because it really starts that process of thinking about sustainability in a very systematic way and using this framework to think about or ask questions that you haven't asked before, which is a really nice quote that I got from one of the projects yesterday. It's really about looking at things differently and establishing the frameworks and structures and policies within the organization, and building that capacity going forward. So I think it's good to be ambitious, but especially for a pilot, all of those 20 projects, they're really championing this, and that in itself is really great and should be applauded. So yeah, going for a really high rating isn't necessary. Can you please explain what the difference of the permanent credit screened and additional credit screened is?
Yeah, I'll go for this one first, and then Tom can jump in afterwards. So yes, good question. And this is linked back, just for everyone else, to the materiality assessment, where projects answer questions, which then helps identify which areas are more important and relevant to that particular project. Then after that process is done, there is the screening process which happens, and it's based on the capital value of your project. Yes, so no, sorry. So what those bands are, it's 0 to 20 million is the first band. There are 10 credits which are permanently screened in, and then for projects under 20 million, there are an additional credits screened in which are more important to the deemed more important to that particular project as a result of how they answered the materiality assessment questions. The permanent credits screened in, so those are 10 credits which are screened in for all projects, and those again were decided, deemed, determined to be relevant for all projects across all sizes, again with consultation with LOCI and other stakeholders too. I can't remember what those are off the top of my head. But then the other 10 credits are those which then are most important to the project by the materiality assessment. So maybe Tom, if you can jump in.
No, I think you've just about got it, Ty. It's something, the language is something we've been playing around with a lot. So those additional credits screened in, you could almost consider them floating credits. So it's much easier if I've got a whiteboard behind me, but I don't. So you've got, every project will have the 10 permanent credits always screened in, regardless of the capital size. And then depending on the CapEx of your project, you'll have additional credits, additional floating credits screened in. Now, you'll either have 10, 15, or 20 through the pilot, additional floating credits screened in from the remainder of the pool of credits. So those credits are screened in, and then the other part, which I can't remember if we've spoken to or not, but the weighting still influences the points distribution across those credits. So both the permanent and the floating additional credits, the points associated with them is influenced by the weighting, and so that materiality questions that you've answered.
And then the other point about that is just to reiterate that screened in means available. So there would, for that scenario, for that lowest capital band, there are 20 credits screened in, but none of them are mandatory. Not the permanent credits screened in are not mandatory. They are just available to the project, and the project can choose to achieve as many or as few as kind of best suits them.
Okay, a question on the verification process for IS Essentials. Will there be a single verifier?
So that's at the moment through the pilot process, there's a single verifier, but we are still reviewing how that verification process will work for the full tool. So everything that we're doing at the moment is a pilot. We're testing it, and we want to see how it works across a number of across the registration, the assessment, the verification, and the certification. So all of that has been tested through the pilot, and verification and how we verify is one of those. But certainly for the pilot, we're using one single verifier for the time being.
Mm-hmm. A question on the award levels. Are they the same as for other projects? So bronze, silver, gold, and the corresponding points? Yep.
Yes, it's aligned with the other tool. We do have an additional award level, which is just pilot. So if you achieve less than 20 points, you still do get kind of a recognition that you've taken part. And again, just to celebrate that you're part of the journey, and also to recognize the feedback that you're giving to us to help us develop the tool.
Does IS Essentials still cover all of the SDGs? I think it covers the same SDGs as the full tool.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I think there are two SDGs that are not covered, and one is poverty, and I can't remember right now. I should remember the second one. but there's one other SDG which is not really covered because it's not that relevant for the scheme for infrastructure. But I think ICE Essentials covers the same credits and categories as the previous or the existing ratings tools. Ty, is that right?
I would need to check. I don't know off the top of my head. There are 4 credits. I've just been trying to think. There are 4 credits which have been reduced between them. I was trying to think if any of those credits. I need to check and come back on that.
I suppose that the thing is, those 4 credits which have come out, Ty, they are from each from different categories. So it's not like we've removed an entire category. So the removal of 4 credits from version 2.1, if you like, is and again, I can't remember off the top of my head either, but it's individual credits rather than full categories. So I'd suspect, but we'll maybe just check that. I'd suspect that the same UN SDGs which are covered under 2.1 would be covered under Essentials.
And the second category is hunger. Thank you, Carrie. Okay. Can we get a copy of the presentation slide? Yes, that will be made available after the presentation, after the session.
There was a question about base case. Maybe I can try and give it another stab, and then Tom, you can jump in.
Yes, let's try that one first.
Okay, great. So essentially, let's start from the beginning. A number of IS credits recognize and the betterment or improvements from business as usual. And that's the base case is then developed to establish this business as usual so that you can then prove and show how you are doing better in your actual project in terms of things like energy and water and so you have to develop this business as usual, which is effectively the base case. And in the past, it's been developed on modeling, and it's been done at the very earliest stages of the project. And some of the concerns of projects have brought us and some of the issues with that is that what I was trying to point out is that if you're doing something based on modeling at the very earliest stages, those assumptions are often very different from what happens later on in the project. So what we're now trying to do, rather than have that base case and business as usual defined based on modeling, it's the reverse. We now establish what is actually happening for the real project. So how much water is it really using in its construction process, and then there is still some modeling for the ops, but how much it's a lot tighter, I guess, in terms of you really know now what the project is going to be doing and how much it's going to be using. And then you would work backward and say, oh, that is my actual. But if I had done this project as a business as usual, I wouldn't have used, for example, rainwater harvesting for this scenario. And therefore, that is an initiative to be added back into my actual to take me to a business as usual base case. That's my best go at it. Hopefully, I haven't made it worse. Tom, do you want to jump in?
No, well, I think that was good. Thanks, Ty. I think probably just to point people to a couple of things. There is a ruling, for those of you who are ISAPs, there's a ruling which is applicable to the full version of the manual around this base case backcasting approach. And there's also a webinar through ISAP resources. So if you have a look at the ISAP resources, there's a good webinar delivered, I think it's by Ben, where he talks through in detail around that.
Yeah, a question about the scale of cost for ratings once the tool is finalized. To be determined, and we're working through the pricing at the moment. I think that's a follow-up question from Hope. Does it mean you can't submit your design rating until as-built is completed if you're doing a reverse calculation?
Oh no, it just means that the process you do your base case at the latter stages of your design rather than at the kind of concept stages of your design. Yes. That one's
okay. I think we addressed Herman's question, didn't we? whether the tool is
Yes.
tested. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That was the last question as far as I can see. Unless anybody's got any last minute questions. Yeah, so we hope this was useful. If you've got any further questions, or if you would like, I'll just finish that. If you would like to discuss any potential pilot projects, please feel free to reach out to myself or anyone at the ISC, and we're happy to chat more. The presentation will be shared and the slides as well. And I think we've got a few more minutes to attend to the last questions. So we'll just jump here. Why not just calculate savings from initiatives rather than use base case?
So my understanding is that this is one of the, so I think other tools might do that. For example, I believe Green Star does do that. But one of the points of differentiation for ICE Essentials is that it's not a level playing field. There's multitude of assets involved, and it's really difficult to establish particular benchmarks for example, a road compared to a railway, compared to the port, compared to a beacons upgrade. And therefore, it was determined at the very beginning of the ICE Essentials tool that there would be the space case, and then you demonstrate improvements over that. It does still reward the initiatives or the savings from initiatives. It's just drawing a line in the sand. It's the project comparing to itself, I guess, rather than to a industry norm, which doesn't really exist in the infrastructure sector yet. We are also working on that, but that's a long-term project. Anybody want to add to that?
Okay, I think that was it. Thanks everyone for your time and for your good questions. And yeah, reach out if you would like to discuss more. Thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Cheerio.